Good morning. Welcome to the online learning. So today we are going to discuss on role of hormones in reproductive cycle. So what do you mean by the reproductive cycle? What is the different hormonal level and their control in the monitoring this reproductive cycle in females? So that too in human beings. So we are going to learn certain aspects which are play a very important role for well-being of a reproductive health. So let me to share the screen. Okay, so coming to the introduction, sexual reproduction is the most important. All the species, they are going to maintain their species for the generation to generation by means of reproduction. So that is what the significance of reproduction. Then reproduction will be going to occur. So when an individual or an organism, if it is reproductive health is well and good, then what do you mean by this reproductive health? So why we call it as a reproductive health? And this reproduction is a one of the important basic distinguished characteristic from the non-living to living organism. Yes. So coming to the reproductive section of a male and female, the reproduction in human beings is by means of sexual, where the male and female contact is required, and both the male and female organs are required for the sexual intercourse. The sexual reproduction, the physiological condition in human beings is totally controlled by the different hormones. They play a very important role. What are those hormones which play a very important role that we will be going to study within a couple of minutes. Then coming to what do you mean by this reproductive cycle? So in human beings, for the reproduction, the reproductive cycle play a very important. So what do you mean by the reproductive cycle? So the best example for the reproductive cycle in humans, that is in female, is a menstruation cycle. So what do you mean by this menstruation cycle? The woman reproduction, regulated in a female by the menstruation cycle, and the regular cyclic hormonal changes with coordinate with the changes of the ovary, okay, internal reproductive tract, uterus, and all these together constitute, we are going to call it as a reproductive cycle, that is a menstruation cycle in female. Well, so what are the different changes and also what are the different phases in this reproductive cycle that will be going to lead into eventually to for the well-being of this reproductive health. Yes. So other than these human beings, what this reproductive cycle is called? In a cattle, this reproductive cycle, we are going to call it as an estrus cycle. Okay, so this estrus cycle will be going to exhibit it 4 pages. Okay, that is proestrus, estrus, metaestrus, and diestrus. Where in case of in human beings, this cycle, that is a reproductive cycle, we are going to call it as a menstruation cycle, and this menstruation cycle we are going to divide it into 2 phases, okay, according to the what are the physiological changes they will be going to take place in the reproductive tract and also in a physiology of that particular female. So let me to explain in detail about the menstruation cycle and with their phases and also the hormonal changes, hormonal levels, and these hormonal levels, it brings the changes in a different physiological conditions. Say for example, ovarian changes or even in a uterus changes. This reproductive cycle, it will be going to start for the first time in female. So at the age of 12 to 14, that we are going to call it as a menarche. Means it will be going to indicate when a female reached to the puberty, then a reproductive cycle will start activate, so that we are going to call it as the first menstruation cycle start that begins, that we are going to call it as a menarche. The cycle is going to end at the age of 50, so that we are going to call it as a menopause. Usually in a female, this reproductive cycle will be going to stop after the 50 age, so that stage we are going to call it as a menopause. This reproductive cycle, that is a menstruation cycle in female, in human beings, it will be going to last at 28 to 29 or at maximum 30 days. Okay, so every 28 or 30 days the cycle will be going to begins a cyclic event which are going to take place, and they will be going to bring a lot of changes in the reproductive physiology of that female in an uterus or ovary. Yes, so look at here in this diagram. So it explains all the different lines which you can see, the red line, blue, orange, green. Okay, so all these organs will be going to explain the different changes which are brought by the different hormones level in these two phases. The entire reproductive cycle in a female is divided into the two phases, that is a follicular phase and luteinizing phase. So this follicular phases, what are the changes will be going to take place in a uterine cycle, and what are the hormonal changes which takes place in ovarian and anterior pituitary. The pituitary gland is a master gland which play a very important role. All the signals for the endocrinology will be passed from the anterior pituitary gland, which will be leads to the again triggering for the production of various sexual hormones, or this the reproductive cycle controlling hormones. Say for example follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, what we are going to call it as luteinizing hormone, okay, and also testosterone hormones. And body temperature, what is the body temperature during this entire course of this menstruation cycle in female, 28 to 30 days, and what are the ovarian changes? So female is have the two functional ovaries, and what are the different changes will take place in the ovary also. The menstruation cycle start from the 0 to the 14th day. So enter this menstruation cycle. Say for example, if it is a 28 days, then exactly we are going to divide into half. That is a 14th day. If you consider entire full cycle is a 28 days, then 14th day is exactly the half of that. On that day, the ovulation will be going to take place. What do you mean by the ovulation? The process of release of egg from any one of the ovary in female. So at the exactly 14th day of this menstruation cycle, that process what we are going to call it as a ovulation, and this ovulation is required for further fertilization and embryo development. So look at here during the ovulation, what is the main cause of this ovulation in ovary? LH surge we are going to call it as. What do you mean by the LH surge? During this phase, look at the hormone level. The LH hormone is a very high and peak on 14th day of menstruation cycle. As a result of this high concentration of luteinizing hormone will be going to lead to the rupture of these different Graafian follicles, which are layers which are present in this ovary, and it will be going to lead to the ovulation. Once this egg is released, and it will be going to wait in fallopian tube for the fertilization. Fine. So follicular phase from the 0 to 14th, and 14th day to 28 days we call it as a luteal phase. In this luteal phase you see the endometry. So this is what the changes, cyclic changes in the uterus. The inner lining endometry is divided, endometry, myometry and perimetry. These are the different layers of the uterus. This is what we have shown in the picture is the endometry, inner lining of this uterus. What are the changes, cyclic changes which will take place in the uterus during the follicular phase and uterine phase, and also the different hormone levels, and what are the changes, the in an ovarian cycle changes you can see From the 0 to 14th day, a egg development will be going to take place in a female ovary, a different primary follicles, secondary follicles, tertiary follicles, and later it leads to the Graafian follicle. This Graafian follicles, different layers will be going to rupture and release into the ovum, and remaining part we are going to call it as a corpus luteum. This corpus luteum also will be going to produce one important hormone. Then this corpus luteum will be going to degraded and it will be converted into the corpus albicus. Fine. Once the egg is released on 14th day, then it will be ready for and waiting in the fallopian tube for the sperm to meet and leads to the fertilization, and further development stages will be going to take place. Yes, as I told already, the entire process will be going to divided into the two phases. Okay, different changes will be going to take place in uterus as well as in an ovarian, according to the level of these hormones which are present in that particular during reproductive cycle. Okay, so coming to the end of this talk, that the lutein phase, the corpus luteum play a very important role by producing certain hormones. The corpus luteum is also responsible for a lot of changes in ovary, and finally it will be going to leads to the end of this menstruation cycle. So these are the some of the hormones, that is luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormones, and also testosterone hormones, progesterone hormones play a very important role in a reproductive cycle of the female to maintain. Yes, if there is any problems which are occurred in the reproductive cycle, maybe the deficiency of these hormones or over expression of these hormones, or even a less concentration of these hormones. So all this entire reproductive cycle will be going to stop in the female at the age of 50 years and above, and that, as I already mentioned, is we call it as a menopause. Yes, thank you students, thank you one and all.